Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who.
My anus is bleeding!
He can't sit down.
They call them dumps, big massive dumps.
Got a flame coming out of his butthole.
Beta male.
Get in a long tube with a bunch of demons.
Don't you ever do that. Don't you ever do that. I tell you, don't do it.
Oops.
We're under attack. It is an alien force, not of this world. It's not human intelligence.
Bullshit.
Trust me, I'm like a smart person.
Bullshit.
It's not a salami sandwich.
Disappointed!
Repeat the line.
Disappointed!
How you like that, boy?
No.
Give me a break.
Stop it.
Fired.
Fired! Fired! Bitch, move it along.
Now witness the firepower of this fully armed and operational battle station.
The Republican Party's racist.
Oh my God! He admitted it!
Around the nation, Waldorf Nation. It's Thursday. We got a great show for you all today. Thank you for tuning in. Please like and share the stream. Very important that you do so. We've got some important stories, including the bombshell report about Clarence Thomas and corruption. Interesting. So actually, you know, I think the best part about this story is not just showing about Clarence Thomas and his personal corruption, but also the corruption of the system. And I'm going to get into the details of that entire report. Wonderful journalism and investigation on the part of ProPublica. Fun. We'll get into that. We also are going to start out with a little bit of karma. And this is from a member of the Exonerated Five, speaking out on the Trump indictment and his arraignment and arrest as well. Then we have Charlie Kirk arguing that, you know, when it comes to my freedom to go and get as many guns as I want, some of you will die. And that is a price that I am willing to pay. I'm not kidding. He's going to make those arguments. I've got video. We'll take a look at that. And then, again, a lot of this is very policy, explanation heavy. So we'll get into that. And if we have time, Kansas just passed a bill where they're going to inspect the genitals of children. Trans children. So, oh boy. Yes, here we go. That started. And Republicans are also pushing to, on a national level, cut taxes for the rich. Unsurprising. So we've got all that stuff. Let's get into it. We'll start out with a little bit of karma. Gotta love karma. All right. In what is probably a really good example of karma, a member of the Exonerated Five, originally known as the Central Park Five, has decided to take out a full-page ad in the New York Times against Donald Trump. Awesome. So let's get to the details. Yusuf Salam, again, one of the 5 exonerated members of the group of Black and Latino teens that were wrongly convicted of a 1989 rape in New York City's Central Park. and is now, by the way, a candidate for New York City Council, posted both a tweet and an official op-ed page from the New York Times on the day of Donald Trump's arraignment and arrest. In fact, here's his tweet. Over 30 years ago, Donald Trump took out full-page ads calling for my execution. Here's my ad in response. So I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I suggest that you check it out as well, because it's pretty great. So, look, he detailed, of course, what Donald Trump had said about him and the other teens in his op-ed, including the fact that Donald Trump, after calling for his execution, and then after the exoneration, the fact that Donald Trump never even took back his statements for calling for their execution for the crimes that they had never committed. Salam wrote this: "Now, after several decades in an unfortunate and disastrous presidency, we all know exactly who Donald J. Trump is. A man who seeks to deny justice and fairness for others while claiming only innocence for himself." Yeah, true. Very, very true. Now, look, Salam and the four others, Corey Wise, Kevin Richardson, Raymond Santana, and Sean McRae, they were exonerated in 2002, as well as, of course, DNA evidence showing them, or showing the police who the actual attacker was. Despite that, Trump, again, never walked back his comments. In fact, in 2019, he said this, quote, you have people on both sides of that. They admitted their guilt. Bro, they were exonerated. That means they didn't do it. They didn't do it. All you could say is, oh, wow, they didn't do it. Well, obviously, since they're innocent and were proven innocent and exonerated, well, I was wrong. How hard is that? How difficult is it for Donald Trump to admit that he was wrong on something where he was factually wrong? No.
Can't let that happen.
No, we cannot. We can never admit that you're wrong. Never apologize. They must have done something wrong. I mean, look, they admitted they were guilty. Yeah, that's because they were beaten by police officers and forced into a confession. Apparently, though, that doesn't mean anything to Trump, because at the end of the day, what are they to him? They're minorities. Those people. They must have been guilty of something anyway. You know how they are. Criminals. Rapists. Even if they didn't do it that time, I'm sure they did it to someone else. And besides, people on both sides of that. What are you talking about? What both sides? What sides? Now, Salam continues by saying, quote, here's my message to you, Mr. Trump. In response to the multiple federal and state criminal investigations that you were facing, you responded by warning of potential death and destruction. And by posting a photograph of yourself with a baseball bat next to a photo of Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg. These actions, just like your actions leading up to the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol, are an attack on our safety. Now that you have been indicted and are facing criminal charges, I do not resort to hatred, bias, or racism as you once did. Even though 34 years ago, you effectively called for my death and the death of 4 other innocent children, I wish you no harm. He then instead wishes that Trump gets, quote, the presumption of innocence and a fair trial, which I agree with. But he does point out the fact that they didn't get the presumption of innocence and a fair trial. They served years in prison for a crime they never committed. And unfortunately, this happens in this country all the time. He said, then, if the charges are proven and you are found guilty, I hope that you endure whatever penalties are imposed with the same strength and dignity that the exonerated 5 showed, as we served our punishment for a crime that we did not commit. Look, this is a great example of someone who was a victim of the system that had abused them. And no doubt they were victims of the system. They're also, again, secondarily victims of Donald Trump, who wanted them, again, murdered for something that they didn't actually do. And also, it's a great example of somebody who had been through this and is trying to do better. Look, again, Trump claims that he's a victim. He's the biggest victim, the most victimized victim. I've been treated worse than Lincoln. No, Lincoln was literally murdered. You've not been treated worse than Lincoln. You've not been treated worse than Jesus. I'm not entirely sure if Donald Trump referred to himself as Jesus, but certainly there are Republican politicians like Marjorie Greene who have compared him to both Jesus and Nelson Mandela. I mean, that's insanity. He's nowhere near close to that. But look, the other thing is, with Trump, he's had privilege his entire life. Number one, obviously being born rich. And of course, having the advantages that come with that. But also, just having the advantage of getting the benefit of the doubt. Something Salam and the other four did not get on account of their skin color, background, and yes, socioeconomic status. Look, that's the systemic injustice at play. And something Salam points out. Quote, the issues plaguing Black and brown communities, including inadequate housing, underfunded schools, public safety, and lack of job opportunities are the same as they were when he was a boy, and became worse during Donald Trump's time in office. And I think that's really, really important to point out. This is just more than just the dunk on Trump, which, by the way, is fun and well-deserved. But there's also a message here. And I appreciate the message that Salam points out the problems with not only the justice system, of course, but again, the issues in the Black and brown community. How you have a legacy of slavery and Jim Crow that exists in the form of basically underinvestment in the Black and brown communities, even in liberal places like New York. I think that's one of the things that's a big disappointment here. When it comes to people that live in, again, Democratic run areas, because they ain't perfect. There's really no area that is perfect. And so you do have a lot of these issues in the Black and brown community. And look, one of the other things that's also a disappointment under, I'd say it, the presidency of Barack Obama. Okay. His presidency didn't really address a lot of those specific economic issues the Black community faces. One of those things, by the way, is healthcare. Look, we still have issues with Black Americans running into barriers when it comes to getting the same kind of quality healthcare as their white peers. Now, there's various different reasons for that. Of course, there's implicit unconscious biases against them in actual treatment, but there's also just the issue of being able to afford to go and see a doctor on a regular basis, or being able to afford your medication in the system that is for-profit healthcare. As such, all of these issues, which, by the way, again, I'm telling you that they have a huge impact on the Black community, but they also have an impact on all other communities as well. But I think it's disproportionate because what you have here is African Americans that have huge reductions in life expectancy and increases in diseases that, again, could have been managed or could have been prevented had people had access to preventative care and medications. But because of our for-profit healthcare system, we don't have that. And during the time where President Obama had the ability to at least put us towards a public option, which would have been much more affordable, much less, of course, in my view, we should have went for a single-payer healthcare system, an expansion of Medicare to everyone. Instead, we had the ACA, which, yes, has done some positive things, but also it's a continuation of this for-profit model that prices so many people out, especially those who are in the lower income spectrum, generally tending to be minorities in the inner city. And not only that, but of course, you have issues with pollution in minority areas, lack of regulation. You have even the lack of trees. Now you might think, oh, wait a minute. lack of trees. Well, how does that have an impact? Well, it leads to more heat-related illnesses, increased temperatures in urban areas. That's a problem. So, and look, I also want to acknowledge that, yes, we can't fix all these systems overnight. No one president could. But at the same time, if you're not actually fighting for universal healthcare or things like free colleges or finding a way to change the way that, for example, we fund schools, like in the inner city, instead of using property taxes, for example, to fund schools, which leads to massive disparities in poor neighborhoods, maybe we ought to come up with a better system. Now, look, President Obama also supported expanding the use of charter schools. Now, that's a problem, and that's a huge mistake, and something that the Biden administration is actually reversing course on, and that's good, because what charter schools have done is funnel wealthier students and, of course, tax money away from public schools, which has had a devastating result on overall education. And again, I'm trying to be fair. It's not like Obama did all terrible things. The focus on universal pre-K is great, but at the end of the day, we don't have universal pre-K. The administration couldn't get it done to be universal, but there was some movement in cracking down on for-profit schools, which, again, overwhelmingly took advantage of the black community, getting them into debt for, massive amounts of student loan debt. And then for what? Nothing. A useless education, useless degree. At least the Obama administration had tried to, crack down on them and forgive them, when it came to how much they borrowed to go to these for-profit schools. And of course, it's one of those things that the Trump administration and Betsy DeVos, specifically as education secretary, had fought against being able to cancel those specific debts. So look, again, there's a lot of issues here that Salam points out. And basically what it seems to be to me is that I see that, in a lot of cases, Republicans, like Donald Trump, they get off and they break things. And then Democrats don't really fix those things that are broken. And maybe they are able to fix some of those things, but Republicans tend to break more than, even the most well-intentioned Democrats can fix. And as a result of that, we never actually move forward. We just keep getting inched back. And it's especially true for minority communities. And so, look, Salam, I really like that he spoke to it. And also, once again, got this well-deserved dunk on Donald Trump for, again, calling for his execution. And it is what he had tweeted before when the news had broke, of this being karma. Well-deserved karma. Okay. Once upon a time, Trump opened up a college. Ah, yes. Great point. Okay. Moving on. Let's go to deregulation for railroad safety. Oh yeah, that's another good point. Let's go to the next story here, and this is Clarence Thomas. A new report has revealed Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas has been the recipient of possibly millions, if not more, dollars in free gifts from an incredibly wealthy Republican donor. Now, ProPublica reports that billionaire donor Harlan Crow had, for many, many years, for decades, had treated Thomas to years of luxury vacations. Yes, very, very luxurious trips. Part of the report notes that Thomas would go on cruises in far-flung locales, and Crow's yacht, his mega yacht, by the way, would fly in his private jet and keep company with Crow's powerful friends at the billionaire's private resorts. So, okay, Now, you might be wondering, and I don't see the problem. What are you talking about? He just went on trips with friends. Crow, he's just sharing his wealth. That's what's going on. That's it. Okay, but the issue here is transparency and trust in the court as an institution, which is incredibly low. Look, the report points out that for more than 2 decades, Thomas had accepted luxury trips virtually every year from the Dallas businessman without disclosing them. A public servant who has a salary of $285,000 a year, he has vacationed on Crow's super yacht around the globe, flies on Crow's Bombardier Global 5000 jet. I don't even know what that is. He has gone with Crow to the Bohemian Grove, the exclusive California all-male retreat. No, not going to do it. And to Crow's sprawling ranch in East Texas. And Thomas typically spends about a week every summer at Crow's private resort in the Adirondacks. That sounds very, very nice. Wonderful. So now, look, these are considered gifts. All expense paid trips. One of them could have cost him around $500,000 on one trip. One vacation, but he didn't pay a cent. He didn't have to. All gifts. So now, okay, there's nothing in the Supreme Court that says that you can't take gifts, but you should report them. According to ethics law experts, Thomas's failure to include any trips on his financial disclosures appears to, quote, violate a law requiring justices, judges, members of Congress, and federal officials to disclose most gifts. These trips appeared nowhere on Thomas's financial disclosures. His failure to report the flights appears to violate a law passed after Watergate that requires justices, judges, members of Congress, and federal officials to disclose gifts. He should have also disclosed his trips on the yacht, according to ethics law experts. But, ethics, schmethics. I mean, come on. Yeah, I mean, am I supposed to report every single, trip that I take, thanks to, that was paid for by my billionaire friend? Yes. It's literally the least that you can do is be like, hey, I went on a all expense paid trip. But here's the thing. There are so few restrictions on Supreme Court justices. On the gifts, I mean, and there's a reason for that, okay? Apparently, since they have lifetime appointments, they're theoretically insulated from corruption. Well, I mean, since you don't have to run for election or anything like that, and you just get a lifetime appointment, theoretically, that those gifts are not supposed to sway you in one way or the other. Well, how's that working out? Now, that's also different from the members of Congress who are prohibited from taking gifts worth $50 or more and would actually need pre-approval from an ethics committee to take these trips that Thomas had accepted from Crow. So again, you can take the gifts if you're a Supreme Court justice, but you have to disclose them, and he didn't do that. So now wait, if these weren't disclosed, how did ProPublica find out? Well, their report says that they uncovered the details of Thomas's travel by drawing from flight records, internal documents distributed to Crow's employees, and interviews with dozens of people, ranging from his super yacht's staff, did I mention it was a super yacht? To members of the secretive Bohemian Club, to an Indonesian scuba diving instructor. Wow. Damn. So now, the argument here that you're seeing from conservatives defending Thomas is, you understand, he and Crow have been friends for a very long time, and there's been absolutely no influence on Thomas's decisions. I mean, they were friends even from before the time that Thomas joined the Supreme Court. And they've been very, very generous to Thomas's family just because they love them. Now, one example of some of the previous generosity came from a Politico report back in 2011 that revealed that Crow had actually given about $500,000 to a Tea Party group founded by Ginny Thomas. Now, remember, Ginny Thomas has had a pretty long career of activism in right-wing circles. And of course, there's been some let's say, a little bit of scrutiny on some of her activities, especially when it comes to January 6th and trying to, people trying to use her proximity to the court through her husband to hear certain cases. So now, let me give you more information about Crow. Long an influential figure in pro-business conservative politics, Crow has spent millions on ideological efforts to shape the law and the judiciary. Big surprise. Crow and his firm have not had a case before the Supreme Court since Thomas joined it, though the court periodically hears major cases that directly impact the real estate industry, of which, of course, Crow is part of. It is unclear, this is according to the report, if Crow has had any influence on the justice's views. In a statement, Crow said that he and his wife have never discussed a pending or lower court case with Thomas. Quote, "We have never sought to influence Justice Thomas on any legal or political issue." Okay, but then let me just ask why it was not reported. I mean, shouldn't it have been not an issue then for Thomas to report these as gifts? Again, it's the least that he can do. I can only think of one. Okay, I can think of two things. One, he's lazy. I don't know about that. No, I don't subscribe to that. Okay, I think really reporting this might look pretty bad for his image. I'm just saying. In fact, according to ethics lawyers, the extent and frequency of Crow's apparent gifts to Thomas have no known precedent in the modern history of the U.S. Supreme Court. Yeah, maybe that's why. Because it's such a substantial amount of being essentially having every fancy trip subsidized by a wealthy billionaire friend. Looks kind of bad if you're on the court, especially if you're somebody who claims to be, I'm just a modern, kind of average, everyday guy, I don't really go, I prefer RVs in the Walmart parking lot. Yeah, it's something that he had said. Now, Nancy Gertner, a retired federal judge appointed by President Bill Clinton, said that, quote, on this, "It's incomprehensible to me that someone would do this." She said that when she was on the bench, she was so cautious about appearances that she wouldn't even mention her title when making dinner reservations. Quote, "It was a question of not wanting to use the office for anything other than what it was intended." Well, apparently, Clarence Thomas has no such scruples. Not at all. Like, he's just bathing in it. The money, the corruption. He does not care at all about the image of the court being corrupted. Virginia Cantor, a former government ethics lawyer who served in administrations of both parties, said that Thomas, quote, "seems to have completely disregarded his higher ethical obligations." No, really? Really? And I'm not making fun of her because I think she's absolutely astute in her, observation here. But yeah, he has no apparently ethical obligations at all. Ethics schmethics, he says. Now, Cantor, now a watchdog, now part of the watchdog group Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, said, quote, "When a justice's lifestyle is being subsidized by the rich and famous, it absolutely corrodes public trust. Quite frankly, it makes my heart sink." I mean, it's kind of, for me, worse than that. So, look, she mentioned that, yeah, it's a corrosion of public trust. Look, the court is already facing this huge trust deficit. And again, it largely has to do with, I think, the fact that former President Donald Trump was able to appoint 3 very conservative pro-corporate justices to the court. I mean, that's probably got something to do with it. Maybe, maybe not. Now, these trips, this report, it's only going to add to the distrust. Again, not only because Crow is a very influential Republican mega donor, but the fact that he is also connected to other mega donors and think tanks that are very ideological. Thomas's frequent vacations at Topbridge have brought him into contact with corporate executives and right-wing political activists. The report notes that during one trip in July of 2017, Thomas's fellow guests included executives at Verizon and PricewaterhouseCoopers, major Republican donors, and one of the leaders of the American Enterprise Institute, which is a pro-business conservative think tank. The outlaw also noted that a painting of Thomas at Topbridge, Crow's private lakeside resort in upstate New York, shows Thomas in conversation with Leonard Leo, the Federalist Society leader regarded as an architect of the Supreme Court's recent turn to the right. Now, look, I'm going to mention, as I did earlier, the fact that a lot of the Supreme Court justices that were appointed and by Trump and confirmed by Republicans and some Democrats as well were handpicked by the Federalist Society. One of them, Neil Gorsuch. Neil Gorsuch, remember, in one case, he had ruled that a truck driver named Alphonse Madden should have died instead of leaving his load during a snowstorm in sub-zero temperatures. So he was shipping meat and, again, ran into a snowstorm, was running low on fuel, bad directions and stuff. So he had to stop the truck and was in, again, I think it was negative 14-degree weather. There was no heat in his cab. He was getting hypothermia and decided, screw it, I'm going to disconnect and use what little fuel I have left to try to get someplace so I don't freeze to death. He did that and then, eventually was able to fuel up, go back, pick up the load, which, by the way, there was a repair person that was also needed in that situation. So went back, loaded and basically finished delivering the load. The company fired him. So he sues, Madden sues, and eventually ended up in front of the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, which Gorsuch was sitting on at that time. Now, of the 7 judges, 6 of them sided with Madden, saying, no, you shouldn't have to freeze to death, for a corporation. And they shouldn't fire you for choosing not to freeze to death. But Gorsuch said, no, you should have to freeze to death. We don't care. The corporation is more important than human lives. And you know what? The Federalist Society, the Chamber of Commerce, they looked at that and they said, yes, that's the guy that we want. That's the thing that we love. You must give your lives for the corporation, for the almighty dollar. Our dollar, not yours. So now, how this relates is, this shows you who the Federalist Society prefers to be on the courts. Now, look, Justice Thomas, he's also deeply pro-corporate. Now, with Thomas, of course, these corporations don't really have to bribe him because he's already on their side. He's always been on their side. Of course, he's in the club. And so these trips, these gifts, that's just the club showing him that, hey, you're one of us, so we're going to shower you with these gifts, which he should have at the very least, had, disclosed. But it's not just about Thomas. I think what the story illustrates is not only his massive, the fact that he does not care, does not give a damn about ethics or transparency, but it's actually about how, unfortunately, the judiciary itself isn't insulated from corruption at all. In fact, conservatives have made sure that very pro-corporate justices be placed in the court. And that goes all the way back to 1971 with the Powell Memo. So now that basically is the blueprint for corporations to take over the country. And that blueprint worked better than they could ever imagined. And in the memo, there was all sorts of different things that they suggested that the right take over for corporations. For example, the right, they said, should go after journalism, the media, which now we have corporate media, academia, the arts and sciences, politicians, which they've been very successful at, and yes, the courts, to turn them all to be pro-business. The memo stated that the judiciary may be the most important instrument for social, economic, and political change, and they're right. They were more right than you could imagine. The writer of that memo, look, Nixon sees the memo and he says, oh yeah, that's the guy. We're going to put that guy in the court. And that's what happened. And right afterwards, the court made two very, very consequential decisions that opened the floodgates of corruption into our political system. One was Buckley Valeo, which decided that government restriction of independent expenditures in our elections violated the First Amendment. So you try to restrict campaign spending. No, that violates the First Amendment. And then in a 1978 ruling, in the case of First National Bank of Boston versus Bilotti, it said the right to attempt to influence the outcomes of elections is actually one of the primary rights the First Amendment was meant to protect, and that now corporations have that right. The same as if they are a human person. Well, we wouldn't restrict a human being from being able to influence an election, right? Well, of course not. That would be a violation of the First Amendment. Well, corporations, they're also considered to be human beings. You know, they're artificial persons constructed. Why shouldn't they also have First Amendment speech rights? And by the way, can also do independent expenditures. That was the Burger Court. Massively pro-corporate, and opened the way for the type of corruption that we have now, today. Is there any surprise that now the result of all this is the fact that we now have a court and a government that is extremely pro-corporate and anti-worker and anti-consumer? Look, the fact that there's money in politics, that corporations can and do illegally bribe politicians who then get elected and then decide who sits in the court. That's how this corruption happens. Thomas sitting there and taking all these gifts and then again ruling, very pro-corporate in his decisions and anti-worker, anti-labor. That's the result of this. And not to mention all the terrible decisions that he's made on the social side. This is why very, very few people in this country now trust the judicial branch as it exists. Just 47%, according to a recent Gallup poll, trust the courts. Only 40% approve of the job the U.S. Supreme Court is doing right now, which is actually tied for a record low. And that's because a lot of us know, and I think those numbers will continue to get, unfortunately, bigger as far as distrust going higher and job approval going lower as people continue to see who the court really serves. They serve the interests of business and not human beings. And that's because the institution itself has been corrupted. And Thomas, this latest thing, is just an example of that. Seems high because there has been, I should say, this fiction in the country that the court is incorruptible and that they only rule on the law and the merits, which we're starting to see more and more people are starting to see that is simply no longer the case. And so, yes, while it seems like, especially if you compare it, by the way, to Congress, then yeah, it's higher than Congress, but it doesn't take much to be higher than Congress. But again, for the longest time, we've been told courts are not corruptible. And we know that that's no longer the case. And hasn't been the case for a very, very long time. Remember when Clarence Thomas was the lone justice that did not want to release the White House documents concerning January 6th? Yes, true. All right. Where's Clarence Thomas' statement? Oops, doesn't have one, never will. Yeah, he doesn't care. Doesn't care at all. So we're going to go to Charles Kirkington the First. I don't know if it's the first or the third. What he thinks the price of liberty is. Spoiler alert, it's dead kids. Okay. Charlie Kirk is admitting that there is a price to pay to being able to play cosplay revolutionary, and that he's more than willing for you to pay it. Take a look.
Having an armed citizenry comes with a price. And that is part of liberty. You will never live in a society when you have an armed citizenry and you won't have a single gun death. That is nonsense. It's drivel. But I think it's worth it. I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. That is a prudent deal. It is rational.
Is it? Well, let's look at the numbers. Now, that happened during a TPUSA faith event on Wednesday. And again, that was in response actually to a question about, hey, there was a mass shooting in Tennessee. And so how do we protect ourselves? And, how do we make the argument that, hey, maybe we should, or how do we make the argument to counter the left in wanting to restrict some access to some weapons? So now, in his response, I agree that he said that when he said that there's a price. There is a price. Let me give you the numbers on that. Every year, about 117,345 people are shot every year in the United States. Okay, well, shot. Does that mean they were killed? No, at least 40,000 of them die from gun violence in general. Oh, okay. Now, nearly 8,000 of that are children from the ages of 0 to 18. Break it down even further, about 321 people of all ages are shot every single day. Between the ages of 1 and 17, about 22 children are shot every single day. So not all of those are, deaths or lead to deaths. Some of them are accidents. Some of them are suicides. Some of them are unintentional shootings. Some are, of course, by police officers or law enforcement. Okay. Basically, that's your price. Those are just the numbers. So now he says, well, that's the price for liberty, right? It's the price for liberty, to live in a free country, protect our goddamn rights. Okay, except the fact that we're actually not free. At least not as free as they want to argue. So let me look at the Democracy Index. This is from the Economist Intelligence Unit's Democracy Index ranking. In 2022, they found that the United States ranked 26th out of 167 countries. Okay, 26th. But wait a minute. Isn't the argument is that more guns equals more freedom? We have the most guns in the world. We got 4% of the population. We got a quarter of the guns. We have more guns than people. About 120.5 guns for every 100 people. Should we not be number one on freedom? The most free in the world. No, we're 26th. Interesting. Now, by the way, let me give you the details on how they, basically what they looked at when it came to freedom. They measured electoral process. Okay, so elections. Government functionality. Does the government work or not? Political participation, voting, very important. Political culture, and civil liberties. Okay, which again, freedoms when it comes to freedom of speech, freedom of expression, being able to defend yourself, that kind of stuff. All right, so now the researchers who looked at this had this to say about the United States' low score on some of these factors, right? Both of which are tied to polarization, functioning of government, and political culture. Now, I've said before, our political culture is very, very fragmented, and there is a gun culture that's part of it. They said this: pluralism and competing alternatives are essential for functioning democracy, but differences of opinion in the United States have hardened into political sectarianism and institutional gridlock. Okay, so we're not as free as we claim to be, as the right says we are. Okay, and by the way, while they're also arguing that we are living in Banana Republic style, Stalin, Mao, and Pol Pot. Okay. But, we're also apparently super divided. And there's a lot of people that are extremely well armed. Does that sound like a good combination? I wouldn't think so. But that said, I just want to be careful to let you know that we're nowhere near like Civil War levels of division. I know there's a lot of people that are out there saying something different, Tim Pool. They believe that, or they spread that narrative. But in reality, while we are divided on a lot of different issues, the vast majority are not like, getting ready for civil war. That's a very, very small minority of insane people. I just wanted to put that out there, okay? Now, that said, Charlie Kirk had also said that the Second Amendment, that's not for hunting. It's not even for self-defense. No. The reason that we need to protect the Second Amendment is the same speech as, well, we have to fight tyranny. You see, we have to fight governmental tyranny with our armed militias. You're reading the Founding Fathers. Well, hold on here. Wait. The Continental Army, not militias, is what actually secured our freedom from the British in the Revolutionary War. I'm not saying the militias didn't play a part, but they're often more romanticized, and in stories and media, they tend to play a much larger role in our imagination than they actually did on the battlefield. We had a standing army that did the majority of the work in that war. And by the way, another idea of the militias, and of course every person being part of that militia, which is again why you should own guns in the home. Well, that was originally so that we wouldn't have a standing army, because a standing army, the thought went, could lead to government being tyrannical. So if you don't have that and you just have militias, then you don't have the tyranny. But wait, oops, not only do we have a standing army, but we actually have one of the most cash bloated and wasteful when it comes to spending. $800 billion a year, more than any other military in the world. And again, massively wasteful. And we have that because you have politicians on all sides, yes, Democrats, Republicans, that keep shoveling more and more cash into the hands of the military-industrial complex. So, the whole purpose of the whole militia thing, we've kind of defeated that and actually made it so that, we have this massive military-industrial complex that's going to crush, average people armed with AR-15s. It makes no sense. history fail. Just everything fail. And by the way, policy, right? In fact, Charlie Kirk then also went in as to saying, you could significantly reduce gun deaths, even though you can't get rid of them completely. You could significantly reduce gun deaths by doing this one thing. What is that, Charlie Kirk? By having more fathers in the home. What? We just got to have more fathers in the home. That'll cut down on all the gun violence. What? Nonsense point. And look, I've got another clip here. He's going to make more ridiculous nonsense points. Watch.
People say, oh, Charlie, how do you stop school shootings? I don't know. How did we stop shootings at baseball games? Because we have armed guards outside of baseball games. That's why. How did we stop all the shootings at airports? We have armed guards outside of airports. How do we stop all the shootings at banks? We have armed guards outside of banks. How do we stop all the shootings at gun shows? Notice there's not a lot of mass shootings at gun shows. There's all these guns because everyone's armed.
Ah, yes. Oh, you see, there are guns there. There's guns everywhere, and so everywhere there's guns, there's no shootings, except that's not true at all. Are you saying that we stopped all mass shootings at airports, baseball games, and gun shows? No. Look, I don't even have to, pull up stats. All you can do is just look at airport shootings, and there's a bunch of them. And some, by the way, that are even stopped with armed guards, so maybe that's a point in his direction, okay? But again, there's been lots of shooting at airports, and by the way, even with guards that do eventually stop the shooter, there's still people that are shot and killed. And maybe that goes to his overall point, well, you can't stop all of them, but, I mean, price of freedom. Except this happens more here in this country than anywhere else in the entire world. And again, there's also been plenty of shootings at baseball games, including one of the more ones that you should know, the congressional baseball shooting involving Republican Steve Scalise. I mean, and look at banks. There's also been plenty of shootings inside of banks. All of this is very easily located information. But I want to get to the point about gun shows, because I think that's the most fun point to debunk. So I said, well, it's gun shows. There's never any shootings at gun shows. No, okay, maybe you qualified it by saying, well, there's no mass shootings at gun shows, but there's all sorts of other shootings. Here's some examples. In 2008, an 8-year-old boy died after accidentally shooting himself in the head at a gun show in Massachusetts. By the way, there was also gun ranges. It's another place where there's lots of guns, right? I seem to remember a story where there was a mass shooting at a gun range. And in 2014, a 9-year-old girl shot and killed her instructor at a gun range in Arizona. 5 people in 3 states were injured when weapons accidentally went off at another gun show in one day in January of 2013. A man seriously injured himself outside an Iowa gun show by accidentally shooting himself in 2018. Well, I mean, that counts. That counts. And according to a 2017 study by the University of California, Berkeley, they found a nearly 70% increase in deaths and injuries from firearms in California communities within, get this, convenient driving distance of Nevada gun shows. So just even the presence of a gun show in a very loosely regulated state leads to an increase in gun violence in surrounding areas. The state of Nevada, the study notes, has some of the least restrictive firearm laws in the country and no explicit regulations on gun shows, whereas California has some of the strongest firearm laws in the country. But if you're getting them from a place that has no regulation, you just pick them up easily, legally, what's to prevent those guns from finding their ways into places that do have more stringent gun laws? And that's sort of the problem that we have, right? We have places that have no rules right next to places that have rules. It seems to not be working very well. And again, that's not even to mention the whole gun show thing, where, we have all the we have so many mass shootings in this country nearly every single day. But apparently, Charlie Kirk thinks that that's just the price of liberty. Even though, as I had pointed out earlier, there are countries with much tighter gun laws that have less guns and are somehow freer than the United States with happier populations. Well, how is that? What has happened? Well, it turns out when you have a better economic system and a more inclusive society where you have labor protections, where you have guaranteed health care, mental health coverage, all that stuff, you tend to have a lot better outcomes. But, Charlie Kirk doesn't care about the outcomes because, once again, for him, it's sort of like Lord Farquaad, right? I know, I can't believe I'm going to Shrek. Some of you may die, but that's, that's just something that you'll have to accept or something. I butchered that completely, but you get the point. Okay. I can't believe I butchered that. All right. Why don't we go geez, I cannot believe that this took wow, that long already. Okay, let me try to do one more story. I'm gonna try to squeeze it into the end here. The state of Kansas has officially passed a ban on transgender students participating in female sports. So now this bill is especially heinous, again, like all of the other trans bans, and completely unnecessary, but has an added terrible portion. Now, Laura Kelly, who was the governor, ended up rejecting the bill. But unfortunately, Kansas Republicans ended up overriding her veto. And so now we have this trans sports ban. And part of it would include genital inspections. So basically, to enforce this ban to keep transgender children out of women's sports, specifically trans women, there would be physical examinations of genitals. And yet it's the LGBTQ people that are the groomers. No, you literally passed a bill that allows them to inspect the genitals of children to see if they're actually biologically women or assigned female at birth. What? And by the way, this not only will obviously affect trans girls, but also there are girls out there that maybe some people might think look too masculine. And so what's going to happen? Well, these girls are going to have inspections as well. It's a gross violation of privacy in an effort to try to stop a so-called problem that isn't actually a problem. Look, there are some places where they have introduced these bans that have no transgender students in women's sports. And they still decide, we're going to do it anyway. Because it's not about trying to protect women's sports. They didn't give a damn about women's sports. They never fund women's sports. Or girls' sports. They don't do any of that stuff. No, the whole thing is to try to just be discriminatory against transgender people. They have a war against transgender girls. Now, HB 2238 was enacted into law on Wednesday after Republicans in the state overrode the veto by 84 to 40 in the House and 28 to 12 in the Senate. The law, which will take effect on July 1st, prohibits biologically male students from participating as women or girls in sports, either in teams or female categories, does allow for mixed teams and for female students to participate in men's sporting events. During a February session in the bill in February, Republican Representative Barbara Wasinger, who introduced the legislation, was asked how the law would be enforced, and she said that it would happen during a student's sports physical. When queried by opposition lawmakers on whether this amounted to a genital inspection, which it does, she reportedly said that she couldn't recall. Oh, I don't know. I can't recall whether or not this allows for invasive genital inspections to make sure that they have no penises. Weak sauce answer. Weak. Now, Mallory McMurrow, Michigan's Democratic State Senate Majority Whip, reacted to this, and I think her answer is, her comment on this is spot on. Quote, forced genital inspections of children. The Republicans who claim to care about protecting children voted for forced genital inspections of children because they're afraid a trans kid might want to play on a team with their friends. Davis Hammett, president of youth voter registration organization Loud Light, described this as a very dark and disturbing day. Now, Wasinger actually tried to defend this bill by claiming in a March 2nd Instagram post that men had biological advantages over females that made competing against them not fair. Now, is that true? Well, a 2017 study found that there was no direct or consistent research suggesting transgender female individuals or male individuals have an athletic advantage. She also claimed that the bill ensures that we're not moving backwards on 50 years of advances for female athletes. But this is also discriminatory against female athletes who, again, may be confused for transgender athletes. You're also, subjecting them to genital inspections, accusing them of being transgender. What I've seen already are reports of, again, cisgender students, cisgender assigned female at birth students who didn't win, accusing another cisgender assigned female at birth as being a trans person, and therefore, that person's trans. They obviously are a man because they have an advantage. No, everybody's built differently. And while, yes, there are individuals that have, since every person is different, everybody does have different, I guess not everybody is able to compete when it comes to, sports exactly the same as everyone else. But there are acceptable limits in the differences of ability and, things like, muscle mass and all that stuff in sports. We already have those, those limits. We already have that range of what's, acceptable. The problem here is what they're doing. A lot of the right wingers in this situation, people who hate trans people, are coming in and saying, well, we think that they have, and this is not substantiated, but we think they have these advantages that are too high. And, women will never be able to compete, except for the fact that women who are assigned female at birth are constantly being able to compete against transgender people and winning. That's not always the case, but it happens pretty often. Because generally when it's sports, it comes down to skill. It comes down to training. And sometimes people are just having a bad day. And so what this is, again, as one of you points out, yes, there are people that are massively sore losers who will use this to their advantage to try and, of course, demonize other people who, again, may be cisgender, in order to, accuse them of being transgender, accuse them of being somebody who shouldn't be allowed to compete. Maybe they've got, you've got too much testosterone. Yeah, that's what it is. Well, there are women who are assigned female at birth that have higher testosterone than the average. And I don't think that they should be able to be banned from sports either. Look, this is, again, a so-called solution in search of a problem, and really just an excuse to marginalize other people in their hateful culture war. There are some girls that work harder in their sports than others. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Anyway. Excuse me. That's all I got for you today. That's all the time I have. Thank you all for going around the nation with me today. Let me read some super chats here. Gabby Mathis, thank you for gifting a Waldorf Nation membership. Also, thank you for the $20. I'm sick of corruption in politics and judges. Proud of the New York Five. The Exonerated Five, absolutely. Proud of them as well. Have I encountered chicken matzo ball soup yet? No, I have not. My sister's last name Seder. Maybe one, wish you were there. I have not tried that. I'm a weird food snob. I'm a super taster. So I'm very, very particular about what I eat. And so therefore, I cook. I cook a lot. And so what I cook very well. But I'm not someone who generally is adventurous in their palate. And I mean no disrespect by that. I just like what I like. Okay, anyway. Gabby Mathis, thank you for another gifted sub. Appreciate that. Yeah, I know. If there's one thing to attack me on, it's how dare you not like different food. Yeah, I am a fuzzy eater. It's true. It's true. But again, I do all the cooking at our house, and so it kind of works out. And that comes from my mom telling me, all right, if you're going to be so picky, why don't you make your own dinner? And I was like, okay, challenge accepted. Okay. Anyway, thank you all again for going around the nation with me today. Please like and share the stream. Again, very important that you do so. We're going to do a raid here. Let's do let's see what people are talking about. Oh, it looks like Hutch is looking into what's going on in Tennessee. So we'll do that. Everybody else, again, thank you all. Have a fantastic day, evening. We'll see you back here later on. Love you all. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation.
There's some whores in this house. Wet ass P-word.
Sexual anarchy.
Venezuela.
Jewish space lasers. Woke mob.
You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.
USA. USA.